So how does the web work? This is very important question to understand why we write HTML and CSS code. If you want to become a web developer, you should be aware of how the web works. With that said, let's start with a very basic example. When you search for a web page, say www.onark.com or just say onark.com, now you expect a web page to come in front of you in browser. So what is actually happening behind the scene which is causing this styled web page to appear? To understand this, consider an example. There is a user who wants to browse on internet. This user is using browser say Chrome or whatever browser the user may use, the main working would be same. The user types in www.onark.com and presses enter, which sends it to the onark.com server. The server actually returns to your browser certain files which are then used by the browser to render the web page. We will come back to them just in a second. These files could be already stored in the server or they can just be created dynamically by the server. Now the question is, how does the server know that by onark.com we meant this server? Is this the address of the server like your street and house number is your address? Actually no. The official address of the server is its IP address, which means the internet protocol address. But user did not pass the IP address, then how did the browser know it? For this, when the user enters URL, which is onark.com in our case, the browser contacts DNS, domain name system server, to get this IP address. DNS server is actually like a dictionary where each domain name is indexed with its IP address, which is returned to the browser. And the browser then uses this address to ask for the server. In our case, it's onark.com server. The question is, why don't we put the IP address by ourselves? Watch these IP address examples. By watching these IP addresses, which I am just showing you, I don't think that one would want to memorize those for each server. If you actually search the server with its IP address, it would give you the same website. But the domain name is much more human readable than just IP address, and they are easy to memorize too. Now URL that you write and just send off is called request. A simple form of a request is like this. It contains the type of request, which could be post if we want to send some data with request, but in our case we are just requesting the data, so it is get request. Then it contains the file name we want and the HTTP version being used by the request. With that, it also contains the domain name we want to send request to and the language in which we are requesting. So in our case it is English QS. This whole request is sent in the form of HTTP request. HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It is used for communication between the client and the server. It is an application layer protocol for sending files like HTML. There also is another transfer protocol which is HTTPS. It stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. It is used for secure communication between the client and the server. It is secure because it uses encryption. So even if anyone breaks into the request, he would not be able to understand it as it is encrypted. Onark.com also uses HTTPS. HTTPS is not a programming language. It is just a simple text-based file to tell the server what the user wants. We would see their practical example just in a minute. Now, in the return of request, the server may send us some files, which can be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and some other files. In this case, the Onark server will send us HTML file. These files that are sent back by the server is called response. A simple example of response is being shown. It has the HTTP version it's using and the response status, which is 200 here, which means OK. So the request was successful. After this, the response contained the date and time of response and the file type that is returned by the server. In this case, it's text or HTML file. At last, it contains the HTML file which is sent as response. Now, what are these HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files? So, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It actually describes the structure of the web page, like it has a heading, an example, a paragraph, or so on. And the CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. The web pages we see are styled, but the definition of HTML we just saw does not imply that styling. So, the web pages are styled using CSS. The JavaScript is used to give web pages the functionalities like what would happen when the user clicks a button and so on. JavaScript is out of the scope of this course. Onark would upload a dedicated course for JavaScript as well. After this, the browser uses this HTML file to create DOM, which stands for Document Object Model. Then the browser sends request to same server for each of the resources used in HTML and required to be imported. When the browser gets all the resources from the server, it then renders the web page using DOM and the CSS. Now let's just jump towards the practical example of how these requests and responses are used in browsers. So open a browser of your choice. I will use Chrome browser for this tutorial. Let's take example of onark.com. We would inspect the working being carried out behind the scene using developer tools. To open developer tools, click the three dots on the upper right corner right here and hover over the more tools option. Now come down and select developer tools. It would open a new portion in your browser window. You can set its position depending on your preferences. To do so, just click on the three dots on the upper right corner of this portion, which is just besides the close button. Along with all these options, you would see these docking options. Just select any of them to change the position of the box. To undock this box, you just have to open the same menu as above and select undock into separate window. And this will open a new browser window for this tool. As you can see, we now have two separate Chrome windows, one for the web page and the other for developer tools. Now click the network tab in the developer tool to monitor the requests and responses. It is asking us to reload the page. You can reload the page using a simple Ctrl+R shortcut on the web page window or by just clicking this icon. After reloading this page, you would be able to see all the requests sent by this browser to the onark.com server. This is the first request sent to the onark.com server, as you can see by its name as well. This is the request status we just talked about and the type of the response, which is document, that means HTML file. Now in order to open this request's description, just click on it. As you can see, this description just resembles the format of HTTP request that we just took as example. This is the request URL, this is the request type as we saw, and the successful status code, which is 200. Down here we have request and response headers. As you are watching, this is the response file sent back by the Onark server. It is a HTML file. Inside the developer tools, we also can filter our requests on the basis of their file types. In order to do so, you can select an option from this menu. Now these are the requests for doc files, which also include HTML file. And these are requests for image files. Now to see what sources are being used to render this page, you can switch to Sources tab in the developer tool. These are the JavaScript files and these are the CSS files. The HTML files were just sent by the server on first request. So we have all these files needed to render this web page.
So hit the like button, subscribe this channel and ring the bell icon so that you may get the notification of all the amazing courses uploaded by Onark for you in free.